Okay, I'd like to kick off session 2 and welcome our 2 speakers. First of all, we'll have Myra Drea. Myra is currently the president and CEO of Opal Resources LLC. She has a Bachelor of Science degree in polymer engineering and a PhD in petroleum engineering from the University of Texas at Austin. And then Don Richards. Don is the senior managing director at Accenture. Don has a Bachelor of Science degree from Case Institute of Technology and an MBA from Case Western Reserve University. So we'll kick it off with Myra.
Thank you. Okay, great. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Case Alumni Association for inviting me to speak today and give you a little bit of introduction to perhaps just a little different view into from a technology entrepreneurship into an oil and gas venture energy startup and financing. It's a little different perspective, and we talk a little bit more about it. And let's see, I call my talk, it's walking into the headwind, creating opportunity from challenge. Clearly, a woman starting off into the energy business has had its various challenges. Talk a little bit more about that. I'll walk through a little introduction into the independent oil and gas field in the U.S. As an industry. It's amazing. Most folks here probably see oil and gas industry through the majors, and you'll be interested to hear it's quite a different story in the oil and gas industry in the U.S. I'll talk a little bit about how I ended up from Northeast Ohio, growing up and going to school here, and ended up in the oil fields of West Texas. And then I'm also going to talk about some of the things that really fired me up and got me going into the oil and gas area to begin with. And I wanted to just premise everything was that fortunately I've had a very supportive family. My husband's been very supportive in all my endeavors. Part of that is that he's also in the oil and gas industry, so he has an understanding of some of the difficulties and challenges. So I wanted to just briefly go through a little bit of a background on independent oil and gas industry in the U.S. Most of you probably don't know that 70% of the domestic oil that's produced in the U.S. is produced by the independents. It's not the majors. We also produce 85% of the domestic gas in the U.S., and we drill 90% of the U.S. wells. The medium company that is producing this oil is made up of 11 full-time employees and 3 part-time staff. 20% are LLCs, 63% are S&C Corps. And the majority are started by geologists and engineers. They're high-tech leaders and innovators. 25% of these independent companies will drill a horizontal well. 62% use 3D seismic. And 36% of the staff, regardless of the company size, is made up of engineers. So it's a huge resource of engineering talent. Nationally, there are more than 20,000 independent producers in the U.S. So it's quite a different story when all you hear in the news and the newspapers are about the major oil companies. But there's a whole industry out there, and what's fascinating about it is that it's all entrepreneurial perspective. The capital budgets for 2007, which was the last data I could get my hands on, and this was only for public companies, was a $77 billion budget. And so it's a huge resource, and we spend a lot of capital. And that's both the interest and the challenge. Anything you do in energy business takes a lot of capital. As we indicated, even on the technology side, getting funding for these type of projects is quite a challenge. Approximately 1 out of 200 teams that are interviewed by private capital investments do get funding. 25% also fail in the first year, and an additional 15% fail in the third year. It's quite a challenge. You have to have competitive bidding for acquiring assets. You look at buying oil and gas properties that have either been developed or maybe wildcatting and going into an exploration effort. And you can evaluate and bid on these, and you only get 3% success record, that you're able to beat everyone else and get to that point of being able to get these assets. And out of that, only 1% have successful closing, where they actually do get the financing and are able to close on that asset. Unfortunately, with the depression in oil and gas prices that occurred at the beginning of 2009 and into 2010, current estimates are over 400 E&P companies that have filed bankruptcy. So it's taken a tremendous hit, but out of every challenge creates an opportunity, and so for those surviving companies, it's an opportunity to go in and be able to pick up assets that could be better developed by others. A little background in Opal Resources. It's an EP company. It was founded in July of 2007 with funding from Goldman Sachs. We started off with an acquisition that involved 8,000 net acres. It had 2 producing wells on it at 70 barrels of oil equivalent per day. So, but this was a key asset. It had a tremendous amount of upside that people didn't see, and we went after it and were able to acquire it. At that time, our well costs were really expensive. For each well we drilled, it cost us $2.4 million to drill and complete. So you had to have success, and very expensive. Although we had good commodity prices back in 2008, it still had a challenge of having a high development cost. We started off actually with my partner and I, who is the CFO. I was very fortunate in being able to team up with a very, very highly talented CFO who'd worked in the oil and gas industry for more than 30 years. He'd been CFO for 3 public companies in E&P, and so I had a tremendous resource with him providing a tremendous insight into the financial markets and my focus on the technical and execution side. We grew over 6 months from the 2 of us to, and truly you're doing everything when you're a small startup. We managed everything until we got our production and going in, and then started to bring on staff. We brought 6 staff. We're at a total of 6 staff at the end of 2008. We're currently now, a year and a half later, we've been able to drill many, many wells. Our production now is at 1,450 barrels of oil equivalent. We've got 35 wells, and we acquired new development acreage. We have 27,000 net acres. We put 1 well per 40 acres, so this represents more than 400 locations that we will drill if we were to hold on to this. But as somebody has talked about already, in E&P, well, in the venture capital side, our life cycle is very short. So our well costs have come down tremendously, both between drop-in service costs as well as efficiency and design. We're constantly challenged with the improvement of the design of the wells. Our well costs have now been dropped down to $1.4 million.